So Aya Wilson was interviewed and probably said something that she shouldn't have said. And I mean that said something she should not have said about the Aces roster last year. What if I told you that the Las Vegas Aces, the team that dominated the WNBA and looked like an unstoppable dynasty, is now falling apart from the inside? And what if I told you that the biggest reason for their collapse was just exposed in a leaked Aya Wilson interview? Yeah, you heard that right. One of the league's most dominant teams is crumbling, and Wilson's shocking confession might just explain why. Like from Aya, it wasn't a championship locker room. I mean, out the gate going into training camp, I was like, we ain't got it. It wasn't that she'd had to keep a lily of her teammates, Wilson said, and because of a test that her former South Carolina coach Don Steady taught her that a winning team should look and sound and feel a certain way, I always told myself every game we gotta get there, and we're gonna check each box, but we didn't this time around, Aya said, or Wilson said she spoke with her core teammates Jackie Young and Chelsea Gray how to prepare them. So obviously she realized that she wasn't going to win a championship and made the whole season about unanimous MVP. But it doesn't stop there. This interview doesn't just reveal what went wrong in Vegas. It also has major implications for Caitlin Clark and the Indiana Fever. Because while the Aces fall apart, the Fever are quietly building something dangerous. What did Wilson say that's got the whole WNBA talking, and what does this mean for the future of the league? Let's break it all down. Alright, let's get deep into this, because this is not just another WNBA drama. This is the moment that could redefine the league. The Las Vegas Aces, once the powerhouse, once the gold standard, are now looking like a team that just ran headfirst into a brick wall, and the leaked Aya Wilson interview, that's the wreckage left behind. Aya Wilson, the reigning MVP, the face of the franchise, the heart and soul of this team, just admitted that she knew from day one this team wasn't built to last. Imagine walking into training camp fresh off a championship, expecting to run it back, only to look around and think, yeah, we don't have it this year. That's not just self-awareness, that's a massive red flag, because if your leader, your best player, is saying that before the season even starts, then you're already losing before the first game is played. But what makes this even crazier is that it wasn't just some minor locker room issue, it was foundational. Wilson flat out said if this wasn't a championship locker room, that's a heavy statement. That's the kind of thing that when you hear it, you realize everything you thought about this team was a lie, because from the outside, the Aces looked like they had everything under control. They had talent, experience, coaching depth, but behind closed doors, they were barely holding it together. We have to get better. We have to really take a sharp look at ourselves, look ourselves in the mirror, see our shortcomings, and then you gotta make the moves necessary, whatever that means, to put the best product that we possibly can. It's not going to be the same group probably next year, and now we're seeing the aftermath, because when you lose one or two key players, that's just business. But when you lose half your team, that's a collapse. Kelsey Plum gone, Tiffany Hayes gone, Alicia Clark gone, Sydney Colson gone, even Kate Martin, a promising young player, left unprotected and taken in the expansion draft. The Aces aren't just losing pieces, they're getting gutted, something that happened to one WNBA team this offseason. And I told somebody a while back, I said I'm going to start doing some digging, alright. And the digging was, why is A'ja Wilson losing all of her teammates with the Las Vegas Aces? What's going on? Everybody leaving town. And all of a sudden, an interesting article dropped with some very interesting comments where it looks like A'ja Wilson's driving a bus and her teammates with the Las Vegas Aces are in front of the bus, and she just ran them all over. So let's talk about why, because this isn't just about players leaving for better contracts. This is about a culture that, according to Wilson herself, wasn't working, and it all starts with one big question: what happened to the chemistry? Somewhere Kelsey Plum got a little cracked smile, probably off the team. Glad to be, I would guess. Wilson mentioned it in her interview. This team lacked leadership. And that's interesting, because when you look at a championship team, what do they always say? That they had a brotherhood or a sisterhood, that everyone was locked in, that there was a trust that carried them through the season. But Wilson just exposed the Aces for not having that. She talked about how they weren't clicking, how she had to constantly try to pull greatness out of her teammates, how the accountability wasn't there. You see this quote, it wasn't a championship locker room. Wow. Okay, interesting, that's huge. Because the Aces were marketed as this unstoppable force. They had the swagger, they had Becky Hammond, one of the best basketball minds in the game, they had a roster full of stars. But if Wilson is saying they weren't really a team, then what were they? That's where things get real, because when you look at the why, a pattern starts to emerge. This wasn't just a bad year, this wasn't just some injuries or unlucky breaks, this was a team that deep down had issues. Look at how they played. They had stretches where they looked dominant, but then they'd suddenly look lost. It was inconsistency masked by talent. And it all came to a head in the semifinals against the New York Liberty. That game was supposed to be a statement, a moment to prove that despite the adversity, the Aces still ran the WNBA. Instead, it was a disaster. Wilson talked about it. She said she kept telling herself, we're going to get there, we're going to check each box. But they never did. They had games where they should have dominated, but they didn't. And in that crucial game, the Aces' key players combined for a measly 28 points. That's not just a bad night, that's a team falling apart at the worst possible time. So let's break this down. Because when a team collapses like this, there are usually three big reasons: coaching, chemistry, and leadership. And right now the Aces are failing on all three fronts. Let's start with coaching. Becky Hammond is a legend. She was a finalist for NBA head coaching jobs. She's one of the brightest minds in basketball, but in this situation, there are some real questions about how she managed this team. If Wilson is saying the leadership wasn't there, that means someone wasn't stepping up. And if players are leaving en masse, that means they didn't feel connected to the system. Hammond's coaching style is intense. She demands a lot. But what happens when players stop buying, and what happens when a coach's voice starts to lose impact? We might be seeing the answer right now. And then there's chemistry. That's where the real damage was done. Wilson's words make it clear this team never fully gelled, and you can feel it in the way they played. There were nights when they looked dominant, sure, but there were also nights where they looked like a group of individuals rather than a unit. That's why players are leaving. Thanks for watching, and subscribe my channel.